Here on the show and talking about the changes coming to Hard Knocks and how it will change drastically following more teams. Before I jump into that, I want to mention one last time if you have any questions or comments during the show, to use the tip and donations link at the bottom of your screen to do so. The tip and donations link is GSMCPodcast.net. For any of your questions and comments, if you use that link, I'm able to read them on air, answer them, and have this be a more engaging show, more proactive and things like that. It makes it a lot more fun for me, having more of a discussion, and it's a big help for the network as well. So again, the tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. We always appreciate it immensely whenever you guys are able to use that. But going back to the topic around Hard Knocks, a very popular show. I think it's getting a lot more notoriety over the last few seasons in following the Dolphins, the Colts, and teams like that. Now, for the first time in 2024, they've shifted now to following an entire division instead of just diving really deep into the behind the scenes of one team like they just recently did with the Miami Dolphins. It is a big move, and I'm excited for this because honestly speaking, I haven't really tuned into Hard Knocks that much. I don't know if that's going to kill me with NFL fans and, oh, how could you not watch Hard Knocks? But it hasn't really gained or really hasn't piqued my interest in seeing it. It could be because of the teams as well. The most interesting team, in my opinion, recently was the Dolphins and seeing how all that worked out. But before, it really didn't reel me in because in 2021 they had the Colts on there. In 2022 it was the Cardinals. Just recently it was the Dolphins, and Hard Knocks debuted back in 2001 and only focused on a team during training camp. Then it shifted to a preseason edition of Hard Knocks and an in-season edition in 2021, like I mentioned with the Colts, the first in-season edition team. Then it started growing, I think, a bit more with other people, but even still, it didn't reel me in, like I mentioned. And now this news has really piqued my interest because when Mike Garafolo reported what Brian Rolapp said, the chief media and business officer of the NFL, he said that they were going through with these changes. Mike Garafolo was the first one to report it. And now you have my interest because when you're talking about multiple teams, a whole division, you could take this really in an endless amount of directions, really. If you're trying to find the story, where to follow, how long can you make these episodes, that's really one of the biggest things the NFL wanted to do. They felt that with only one team, they couldn't really control or predict the storylines and how it will play out during the season. They could get lucky and have a really good team and follow them longer, or unlucky in some sense that you have a bad team and it's really not looking good for them. It's interesting because you get to look behind the scenes and see why things are going bad or why things are going really well with a really successful team. Or you can get someone in the middle that's an average team, gets some big wins, has some bad losses, and it's really a roller coaster following that team. All of that had its perks, had its positive sides to it, but I think it will be repetitive, and I think it could get old, at least for me, seeing the same team. And if they're just bad the whole season, you constantly see why they're bad. It can get old seeing all these negative things, even with a good team as well, seeing just if it's all going good behind the scenes and it's all positive and well. Unfortunately, people want to see some arguments, some clashing sometimes. So the middle team would actually work the best, but it's still only one team. So you do just get the same players, the same characters for this just a duration of the season. I like where they're going with this direction, change of direction with going with an entire division. It opens it up an entire landscape of different ways they could go, formulate the storylines, and it also said that no division has been selected yet, which leads me to predict what divisions could be chosen. I have a few that I like. There's definitely some favorites. I think the biggest favorites are the AFC West division. Um, I think just looking at who's in there, what makes up that division, what kind of storylines you can follow. You have two new coaches in there, really officially. Antonio Pierce was the interim head coach last year, so now he gets to take the official reins of the Raiders. Jim Harbaugh is there. Everybody wants to know what Jim Harbaugh is doing, following him, seeing what he says and stuff like that. So that's already an attraction. Plus, you have the Chiefs. Like I mentioned, they're a really good team, and I've dogged on that idea already. But they're on the cusp of making history with a three-peat, trying to go back to back to back, winning Super Bowl. So you could document all that history making behind the scenes of what went into following this three-peat that's never been done in the NFL. So that's a story that's writing itself already. And then you have the Broncos that gives you a bit of everything because they're, you don't want to say really bad, but they're on the other end of the spectrum of being where the Chiefs are heading in this season, if you know what I mean. So you get a little bit of everything. You get the Broncos on one end trying to figure out what to do with their team. You have the Raiders who are trending up, have some promising stars. You could follow a story with them trying to find a new quarterback. If they draft one, how that affects the season. If they make a big trade, that's also something to draw people in. The Chargers as well, who they pick at number 5, how the development of Justin Herbert goes with his relationship of Jim Harbaugh and following Jim Harbaugh's return to the NFL. That's also interesting to see. I mentioned the Chiefs already, how that could all work out. So the AFC West is clearly the favorite for me. Other ones that I think could garner some interest are the NFC East because of, obviously, you got the Saquon trade. A lot of Cowboys players went to the Commanders. Dan Quinn went from the Cowboys to the Commanders. Now he's their head coach. So those are things to see in there. What did I mention? The Giants as well, trying to figure out what they do with this season with Daniel Jones coming back, seeing if he's their guy or not, trying to figure out the rest of their roster and how they figure that out. If Dable and Joe Shane make it to another season potentially, if they have a good one, or they could be gone if they have another bad season like they just did. So that's an option. The NFC North, I think, is an underrated one just because, you have Caleb Williams coming in there. The Packers showed a lot of promise last year, going toe-to-toe with the 49ers. Could have arguably been in the NFC Championship game with the Lions, who also obviously are in that division, trying to rebound after reaching the peak of their best season ever, how they respond to that. And then, who am I missing? The Vikings trying to deal with Justin Jefferson and his contract extension, now trying to find a quarterback for him as well. Those two are underrated. I don't think they have as much attraction as the AFC West just because you're talking about Patrick Mahomes and Jim Harbaugh in there. So to me, they're the leading candidates. Those two are close tied second. And then you have the safest option for me, which is the AFC North. Probably one of the most consistently good divisions, if not the most consistently good competitive division in the NFL. Still has and can provide good storylines with the Steelers, bringing in Arthur Smith, revamping the entire quarterback room, stealing Patrick Queen from the Ravens, trying to figure out what this offense can finally look like, and seeing if they finally get over the hump and win a playoff game after 7 years, I want to say. Derrick Henry obviously going to the Ravens, how they respond about losing in the AFC Championship in the way that they did, going away from Lamar and his running ability, how that changes with Derrick Henry. They lost a lot of players, so that could draw in more people and cause some friction in there with the Ravens. Joe Burrow, how he is recovering from his injury. Jamar Chase, and potentially T. Higgins being there, not being there, trying to deal with being franchise tagged. That could draw more people in. And the Browns as well have a great defense, bringing in Jerry Jeudy, trying to figure out what their quarterback situation is. I think they have 4 guys now that are pretty decent players, or at least they have decent backups that have shown good things in the NFL. Plus Deshaun Watson there, earning a lot of money, struggling to stay healthy, how that all works out. Everybody in that division is just flat out really good and competitive. So Hard Knocks can make a story out of that, and seeing how that all develops. I didn't mention some, the AFC North isn't really there. I don't think anybody really wants to see that. The NFC South as well. You have Kirk Cousins in there. The Saints, I couldn't really find too much to say about the Saints. The Bucks are another one trying to improve on their playoffs, but they didn't make my list. The AFC East as well. It can get interesting with the Patriots if you want to follow them, how the Bills kind of reshape their offensive identity potentially with only really Stephon Diggs there as the biggest star, how that affects them, losing so many players. Yeah, that's there, but again, we're talking about an entire division, and I think these other divisions offer you more with all of their teams instead of those other divisions. They just followed the New York Jets also in the AFC East, so I don't think that will draw too many people in. So AFC West, the clear favorite for me. NFC East and NFC North are right there for second. And if they want to fall back on a safe option, I think the AFC North, they'll never regret following the AFC North is what I'm trying to get at. So Hard Knocks is going to look very different in season edition. We're going to see which division they go with. I think it's going to be one of these 4 that I laid out there. So I'm excited to see that. I'm definitely going to tune in this time. I haven't watched Hard Knocks, but I'm definitely going to tune in, especially if it's the AFC North. I'm definitely going to see what it's all about, how they lay out these episodes, and how they formulate this storyline throughout the season. Hopefully, whichever division they pick makes a deep run at the Super Bowl. So that's also something to take into account. But I will leave it there and move on with this show. The last break of this live show is coming up, and on the other side of it, I'm going to get into Brock Purdy and the 49ers situation regarding his contract, them being surprisingly more open to it compared to a lot of other teams when talking about extensions. So that and more details on Brock Purdy's contract coming up on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.